The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of Valerian Palace as Princess Elena stood by the tall windows of her private chambers. Her reflection stared back at her from the glass, but her mind was miles away, lost in memories that felt both precious and painful. In just 3 hours, everything would change forever. Elena had always known this day would come. Royal blood came with duties that ordinary people could never understand. Love was a luxury that princesses rarely enjoyed, and when they did find it, it often came at an impossible price. She pressed her palm against the cool glass and closed her eyes, remembering the first time she had met Prince Adrian of Northmere. It was 2 years ago at the autumn festival in the neighboring kingdom of Astoria. Elena had been there on official business, representing her father King Marcus in diplomatic talks. She was 24 then, already considered past the ideal marriage age by royal standards, but her father had been patient with her reluctance to accept any of the political matches proposed by various kingdoms. Prince Adrian had appeared at her side during the grand ballroom dance like something from a fairy tale. His dark hair caught the candlelight, and when he smiled, Elena felt her carefully constructed walls begin to crumble. He was the second son of King Aldrich of Northmere, which meant he would never inherit the throne. This small detail made him both more appealing and more dangerous to Elena's heart. They danced that night, and Adrian's gentle humor made Elena laugh in ways she had forgotten were possible. When the music ended, neither wanted to step away. They talked until dawn about books, about dreams, about the weight of royal expectations that both understood too well. Adrian spoke about his desire to study ancient languages and travel to distant lands. Elena shared her secret love of painting and her dream of opening schools for children in her kingdom's rural villages. Their relationship had to remain secret from the beginning. Elena's engagement to Duke Christopher of Rivermarch had been arranged since childhood, a political alliance that would secure important trade routes for both kingdoms. Christopher was a decent man, handsome and intelligent, but Elena felt nothing for him beyond polite respect. Her heart belonged entirely to Adrian. For 2 years, Elena and Adrian met in secret whenever their royal duties allowed. They exchanged letters written in code, met in hidden gardens during state functions, and stole precious moments together in the shadows of grand palaces across the continent. Their love grew deeper with each stolen kiss, each whispered promise in moonlit courtyards. Elena's ladies-in-waiting, Sarah and Marie, helped maintain the secret. They created elaborate schemes to allow Elena private moments with Adrian, covering for her absence during official functions and ensuring that their correspondence remained hidden from the palace guards and court officials who monitored everything. The palace staff noticed small changes in Elena during those 2 years. She hummed while getting dressed in the mornings. Her paintings became more vibrant, full of warm colors and joyful scenes. She smiled more often and showed greater enthusiasm for her charitable work with orphaned children. Even her official portraits from that period captured a glow that had been absent before. Adrian's visits to neighboring kingdoms became more frequent, always perfectly timed with Elena's own diplomatic missions. They perfected the art of appearing casually interested in each other during public functions, while their hearts raced with the knowledge of what awaited them in private moments. Their secret meetings took place in forgotten corners of ancient castles, in rose gardens under starlit skies, and in small chapels where they could speak freely without fear of being overheard. Adrian would bring Elena rare books from his travels, and she would share her latest paintings with him. They talked about a future they both knew was impossible but couldn't stop themselves from dreaming about. The turning point came 6 months ago when Elena's father began pressing more urgently for her marriage to Duke Christopher. King Marcus was aging, and he worried about securing his daughter's future and his kingdom's stability. The Duke's family had grown impatient with the long engagement, and political pressures from neighboring regions made the alliance more crucial than ever. Elena tried to find the courage to tell her father about Adrian, but each time she attempted the conversation, she realized the futility of it. A second son with no inheritance could never provide the political benefits that her marriage was meant to secure. Her father loved her, but he loved his kingdom more, and his duty as king superseded his role as her father. 3 weeks ago, the wedding date was officially announced. Elena would marry Duke Christopher in the Cathedral of St. Augustine on the 15th of October. The news spread across all the kingdoms, and congratulations poured in from royal families throughout the continent. Elena accepted each well-wisher's greeting with practiced grace while her heart shattered a little more each day. Adrian received the news while he was traveling with a diplomatic mission to the Eastern Kingdoms. He sent Elena a single letter containing just 4 words: "I understand. I love you." That night, Elena cried for hours in her chambers, while Sarah and Marie took turns holding her and promising that somehow everything would work out. The final meeting was arranged for today, the day before Elena's wedding. Adrian would come to the palace under the pretense of delivering a wedding gift from his father. They would have 1 hour together in the rose garden before he left forever. Elena had requested this meeting, knowing she needed closure, knowing she needed to say goodbye properly even if it destroyed them both. Now, standing at her window on this beautiful morning that felt like the end of the world, Elena tried to prepare herself for the most difficult hour of her life. In 3 hours, she would see Adrian's face for the last time. She would hear his voice speaking her name, feel his hands holding hers, and then watch him walk away forever. The wedding dress hanging in her wardrobe seemed to mock her pain. White silk and pearls, perfectly beautiful and perfectly wrong for a bride whose heart belonged to another man. Tomorrow she would wear that dress and speak vows of love to a man she respected but could never truly love, while the man who owned her soul would be miles away, probably riding hard toward the border of some distant kingdom where he could try to forget her. Elena touched the small locket around her neck that contained a miniature portrait Adrian had commissioned of them both. It was painted by a discreet artist in a distant province, showing them sitting together in a garden, her head resting on his shoulder, both smiling with pure happiness. It was the only proof that their love had existed, and after today, it would be all she had left of the most beautiful chapter of her life. The clock in her chamber chimed 9 times. In 1 hour, Adrian would arrive at the palace gates. The rose garden at Valerian Palace had always been Elena's sanctuary, hidden behind tall hedges and accessible only through a private gate from the royal quarters. It was the one place where she could escape the constant scrutiny of court life. Today, the autumn roses were in their final bloom, their deep red petals beginning to fall like tears onto the stone pathways. Elena arrived first, wearing a simple blue dress that Adrian had once said matched her eyes perfectly. She had chosen it deliberately, wanting him to remember her as the woman he fell in love with, not the princess who was about to become someone else's wife. Her hands trembled as she arranged herself on the stone bench where they had shared their first real conversation 2 years ago. The garden gate creaked softly, and Elena's heart stopped. Adrian appeared in the doorway, tall and elegant in his formal traveling clothes. For a moment, neither moved. They simply looked at each other across the garden, memorizing every detail, knowing this image would have to last them both a lifetime. Adrian walked toward her slowly, as if approaching too quickly might somehow make this goodbye happen faster than it already was. His dark eyes never left her face, and Elena could see he was fighting the same battle she was, trying to remain composed when everything inside him was breaking apart. They met in the center of the garden path, stopping just close enough to touch, but not quite daring to. The silence stretched between them, heavy with 2 years of love and the weight of what they were about to lose. "You look beautiful," Adrian said finally, his voice rougher than usual. Elena had to close her eyes against the familiar sound of those words, words he had whispered to her in a dozen different gardens, in 100 stolen moments. "Don't," Elena whispered. "Please don't make this harder than it already is." Adrian reached out slowly and touched her hand. The simple contact sent electricity up Elena's arm, and she wondered how she was supposed to live the rest of her life without this feeling, without the way her entire body came alive when he was near. They sat together on the stone bench, their hands intertwined, neither speaking for several minutes. A gentle breeze stirred the rose petals around their feet, and somewhere in the distance they could hear the palace staff preparing for tomorrow's wedding celebration. "I have something for you," Adrian said, reaching into his coat pocket. He pulled out a small wrapped package and placed it in Elena's hands. "I know I'm supposed to bring an official wedding gift, but this is just for you." Elena unwrapped the paper with shaking fingers to reveal a leather-bound journal, handmade and beautiful. When she opened it, she saw that Adrian had filled the first page with his own handwriting. "For the dreams that will have to live in secret, and the paintings that will tell our story when words cannot." Elena pressed the journal to her heart, unable to speak around the tightness in her throat. She had brought something for him, too. A miniature painting she had created showing the view from this very garden, with 2 figures sitting together on the bench in the distance. She handed it to him without words. Adrian studied the painting for a long time, tracing the tiny figures with his finger. "We look happy here," he said softly. "We were happy here." They sat in silence again, both lost in memories. Elena remembered the night Adrian had told her he loved her for the first time, right here in this garden during a summer storm. They had hidden under the rose arbor while rain poured down around them, and Adrian had cupped her face in his hands and said the words that changed everything. She remembered another evening when they had planned their impossible future, spinning dreams of a small house by the sea where no one would know they were royal, where they could live as simple people who loved each other. Adrian had described how he would tend a garden while Elena painted, how they would have children who could run freely on the beach without protocol or guards. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we had just run away?" Elena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Adrian was quiet for a moment. "Every day," he admitted. "But we both know we couldn't have lived with ourselves. Your people need you, Elena. You were born to be a queen, and they will be lucky to have someone who cares about them as much as you do." Elena felt tears starting to form, but she fought them back. "And you were born to explore the world and learn ancient languages and make discoveries that change everything. I would only have held you back." "You would have been enough," Adrian said fiercely. "You would have been everything." They turned to face each other on the bench, and Elena saw her own heartbreak reflected in Adrian's eyes. This was the moment when words became inadequate, when they both understood that no amount of talking could change what was happening to them. Adrian reached up and touched Elena's face, his thumb gently wiping away a tear she didn't realize had escaped. Elena leaned into his touch, closing her eyes and trying to memorize the feeling of his hand against her skin. "I need you to promise me something," Elena said, opening her eyes and looking directly into his. "Promise me you'll be happy. Promise me you'll find someone who can love you the way you deserve to be loved." Adrian shook his head. "Don't ask me to do that. Please. I need to know that this sacrifice means something. I need to know that somewhere in the world, you're living the life you dreamed of." "And I need you to promise me the same thing," Adrian said. "Promise me you'll find joy in your new life. Promise me you'll paint and smile and do all the good things I know you'll do as queen." Elena nodded, even though they both knew these were promises that would be nearly impossible to keep. They were asking each other to heal from wounds that would never fully close, to build happiness on the ruins of the deepest love either of them had ever known. Adrian stood up slowly, and Elena knew their time was ending. Palace protocol meant his visit had to be brief, and if he stayed any longer, people would begin to talk. Elena stood too, and they faced each other one final time. Adrian took both her hands in his and brought them to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "I love you," he said simply. "I will love you until the day I die, and if there's anything after that, I'll love you then too." "I love you," Elena whispered back. "Always." They didn't kiss goodbye. Somehow, they both understood that a kiss would have broken them completely, would have made it impossible for either of them to walk away. Instead, they stood together holding hands, looking into each other's eyes, sharing a moment so intense and painful that it felt sacred. Adrian released her hands and stepped backward. Elena remained perfectly still, watching as he walked toward the garden gate. At the entrance, he turned back one last time. They looked at each other across the garden where they had fallen in love, where they had shared their dreams, where they were now saying goodbye forever. Adrian raised his hand slightly, a small gesture that could have been a wave or a blessing. Elena pressed her hand to her heart in response. Then Adrian turned and walked through the gate, disappearing from her sight and from her life. Elena stood alone in the rose garden as the sun climbed higher in the sky, and the palace around her bustled with wedding preparations. She felt strangely empty, as if the most important part of herself had just walked away with Adrian. Tomorrow she would marry Duke Christopher. Tomorrow she would become his wife and eventually his kingdom's queen. But part of her would always remain here in this garden, frozen in time with the man she could never have, but would never stop loving. The wind picked up, scattering more rose petals around her feet like confetti for a celebration that would never come. The Cathedral of St. Augustine had never looked more magnificent. Thousands of white roses adorned every surface, their sweet fragrance filling the ancient stone hall. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across the marble floor where Elena would soon walk toward her new life. Elena stood in the preparation chamber, surrounded by her ladies-in-waiting who fussed over every detail of her appearance. The wedding dress fit perfectly, its silk flowing like water around her feet, and the diamond tiara caught the light with every small movement. She looked exactly like what she was supposed to be, a radiant bride on the happiest day of her life. But Elena felt hollow inside, as if she were watching someone else's life unfold from a great distance. She had barely slept the night before, lying awake in her chamber remembering every moment of her time with Adrian in the rose garden. The journal he had given her lay hidden beneath her mattress, and the small painted miniature was tucked inside her jewelry box like a secret treasure. "You look absolutely beautiful, Your Highness," Sarah said, adjusting Elena's veil for the 10th time. "Duke Christopher is so fortunate." Elena smiled and nodded, playing her role perfectly. No one could know that her heart had been buried in the rose garden yesterday afternoon. No one could suspect that she was grieving the death of a love that had never officially existed. Outside the cathedral, church bells rang across the kingdom, announcing that the wedding was about to begin. Elena could hear the massive crowd gathering in the streets, her subjects celebrating this union that would secure their prosperity and safety. She thought about what Adrian had said about her being born to be a queen, about how her people needed her. Today, she would begin to fulfill that destiny, even if it meant sacrificing her personal happiness. King Marcus entered the preparation chamber, magnificent in his ceremonial robes. When he saw Elena, his stern expression softened with paternal pride and love. "My dear daughter," he said, taking her hands, "you have grown into a remarkable woman. Your mother would be so proud of you today." Elena squeezed her father's hands. Queen Isabella had died when Elena was 16. but Elena often wondered what her mother would have said about duty versus love. Would she have understood Elena's heartbreak, or would she have reminded her that royal women had always been expected to sacrifice personal desires for the good of their kingdoms? "I'm ready, Father," Elena said, and she meant it. She was ready to do her duty, ready to be the queen her people deserved, ready to honor the sacrifices that had been made for this day. They processed into the cathedral together, Elena's arm linked through her father's. The massive hall was filled with nobility from across the continent, all rising to their feet as the bride appeared. Elena looked straight ahead toward the altar where Duke Christopher waited, handsome and dignified in his formal uniform. Christopher smiled when he saw her, genuine warmth in his expression. He was a good man, Elena reminded herself. He would be a faithful husband and a capable king. Their marriage might not be built on passionate love, but it could be built on mutual respect and shared purpose. Perhaps that would be enough. As Elena walked down the endless aisle, her eyes swept over the assembled guests. For just a moment, her heart hoped she might see Adrian among them. But of course he wasn't there. He was probably already miles away, traveling toward whatever new life awaited him. The thought made her chest tighten with fresh grief, but she kept walking. The ceremony proceeded with ancient ritual and solemn beauty. Elena spoke her vows clearly, promising to love and honor Christopher for as long as they both lived. Christopher's vows were equally sincere, and when he slipped the wedding ring onto her finger, Elena felt the final door closing on her old life. When the archbishop pronounced them husband and wife, Christopher kissed Elena gently, and the cathedral erupted in celebration. Rice and flower petals filled the air as the new couple processed back down the aisle, officially united before God and country. The reception that followed was a magnificent affair. Elena danced with Christopher, with her father, and with dozens of noble guests who wanted to congratulate the new Duchess. She laughed at appropriate moments, thanked well-wishers graciously, and played her part so well that no one could have guessed her heart was elsewhere. Late in the evening, as the celebration continued around them, Christopher took Elena's hand and led her to a quiet corner of the ballroom. "You've been perfect today," he said kindly. "But I want you to know that I don't expect you to love me immediately. I hope that over time we can build something real together, but I understand that arranged marriages don't always begin with passion." Elena was touched by his honesty and perceptiveness. "You're a good man, Christopher. I want to be a good wife to you." "I think we'll do well together," Christopher said. "We both understand duty, and we both care about our people. That's a solid foundation for a marriage." Elena nodded, grateful for his patience and understanding. Perhaps their marriage wouldn't be the fairy tale she had dreamed of as a child, but it could still be meaningful in its own way. The months that followed brought significant changes to Elena's life. As Duchess of Rivermarch, she threw herself into charitable work with renewed energy. She established the schools for rural children she had always dreamed of, organized medical care for the poor, and became beloved by her new subjects for her genuine compassion and tireless work on their behalf. Christopher proved to be exactly the partner she had expected, reliable, intelligent, and devoted to their shared responsibilities. They developed a comfortable friendship based on mutual respect. He never pressured her for more than she could give, and gradually, Elena found a quiet contentment in their partnership. But late at night, alone in her private chambers, Elena would often take out the journal Adrian had given her and write about her thoughts and feelings. She painted scenes from their secret meetings, preserving their love story in watercolors that no one else would ever see. The miniature portrait Adrian had given her remained hidden in her jewelry box, a tiny reminder of what they had shared. News of Adrian reached her occasionally through diplomatic channels. He had traveled to the Eastern Kingdoms to study ancient manuscripts. Later, she heard he had established a school for young scholars interested in historical linguistics. Elena was glad to learn he was pursuing his dreams, even though part of her wondered if he ever thought about the life they might have shared. 2 years after her wedding, Elena gave birth to a daughter, Princess Catherine. Holding her baby for the first time, Elena felt a love so fierce and protective that it surprised her. This tiny person would be her greatest joy and her most important responsibility. Elena promised herself that Catherine would grow up knowing she was loved, no matter what royal duties awaited her. Christopher was a devoted father, and watching him with their daughter, Elena felt a deep appreciation for the man she had married. Their relationship had evolved into something she had never expected, a genuine partnership built on shared values and mutual care. While she would never feel for Christopher the passionate love she had experienced with Adrian, she had learned that there were many different types of love, and some of them could be just as meaningful. On quiet evenings when Catherine was sleeping, Elena would sometimes walk through the palace gardens and remember her time with Adrian. The memories had lost their sharp edge of pain and become something more bittersweet, like looking at paintings of a beautiful place she had visited long ago. She no longer wondered what might have been, but she treasured what they had shared during those precious 2 years. Elena never regretted her choice to honor her duty over her heart. Her marriage had brought peace and prosperity to 2 kingdoms. Her work with the poor and disadvantaged had improved countless lives. Her daughter would inherit a strong and stable realm. These accomplishments gave her life meaning and purpose that went far beyond personal happiness. Sometimes, late at night, when the palace was quiet, Elena would take out her paints and create small portraits from memory. Adrian reading by candlelight, Adrian laughing at something she had said, Adrian's hands holding hers in the rose garden on their last day together. These paintings were her private treasures, proof that their love had existed and had been beautiful, even though it could never be more than a memory. The years passed, bringing new challenges and joys. Elena became known throughout the continent as a wise and compassionate queen. Her schools educated thousands of children, her medical programs saved countless lives, and her diplomatic skills helped maintain peace between neighboring kingdoms. She had become exactly what Adrian had predicted, a queen who changed the world through her caring heart and determination to serve others. And sometimes, when the evening light fell across her garden in just the right way, Elena would remember a young prince who had loved her completely and purely, who had taught her that some sacrifices were worth making, and who had shown her that true love could exist even when it couldn't last forever. The rose garden at Valerian Palace still bloomed each year, its beauty unmarked by the tears that had once fallen there. Elena would sometimes sit on the old stone bench with her daughter, teaching Catherine about the different types of roses and watching her play among the pathways where Elena had once walked with her first love. Catherine would never know about Prince Adrian, but she would inherit her mother's capacity for deep feeling and her understanding that sometimes the greatest acts of love involved letting go. Elena had learned that some stories didn't end with happily ever after, but that didn't make them any less beautiful or important. In her private journal, Elena had written, "True love is not always about being together. Sometimes it's about loving someone enough to want their happiness, even when that happiness doesn't include you. Sometimes it's about finding the strength to build a meaningful life from the pieces of a broken dream." Elena had kept her promise to Adrian. She had found joy in her new life, painted countless beautiful pictures, and done more good in the world than she had ever thought possible. And somewhere in a distant kingdom, she hoped Adrian had kept his promise to her as well, finding happiness and fulfillment in pursuing his scholarly dreams. Their love story had ended not with wedding bells or fairy tale conclusions, but with the quiet dignity of 2 people who had loved deeply and chosen sacrifice over selfishness. It was a love story that would never be told in ballads or recorded in history books, but it had been real and beautiful and had changed them both forever. And that, Elena had learned, was enough.